I wanna go home. I wanna go home. I wanna go home. This is Dingus, a deep reinforcement machine learning cube. And he's terrified. Dingus sees the world through an array of different senses. He explores and experiments in his environment, trying to find positive rewards while avoiding negative rewards. But he really doesn't want to. He's very scared. This time we're going to see if Dingus can learn to survive 5 Nights at Freddingus's, a game that is designed to be extremely similar to another very similarly named game. This was a terrible idea, but it's done now and the results were super interesting. So let's get stuck into the video. Just first off, for maybe the one person watching this who doesn't know, 5 Nights at Freddy's is a very slightly popular horror game that did very slightly well on release. It got maybe like 1 or 2 sequels, a book series, and even eventually a movie, and also ended up giving us this, which I think we can all agree is something. In 5 Nights at Freddy's 1, you have access to a set of cameras, 2 doors powered by some sort of strange solenoid magnet lock technology, a pair of lights, and a very, very pathetic battery. Your job is to survive until 6 AM, and you do that by tracking animatronics as they travel across the building heading towards your office, then blocking their entrance with the doors when they're just outside. All of your actions use up power, run out of power, and you're a sitting duck. Mess up, and, well... It's also just actually really, really cleverly designed as a horror game. Something I only learned to appreciate as I dived into its inner workings to recreate them. The amount of randomness in Freddy's makes it incredibly difficult to know quite how things are working and keeps you on edge all the time. It also makes it really hard for an AI to consistently understand why it's getting punished or rewarded for certain behaviors. Now, understanding how FNAF 1 works is reasonably important to understanding what's going on in this video. So I'm about to drop the quickest deep dive you've ever heard about FNAF 1 ever. Firstly, there are a few main resources I used in my sleuthing. The first is the excellent, and rather popular, video from Tech Rules. I miss you. I hope you're doing well. There's also a spectacular and well-referenced guide from Chimin Ruler 15 on Steam that helped fill in a number of other gaps. I'll reference both in the description. There are 4 animatronics in FNAF 1, and they all follow a simple rule for taking actions. Each enemy has their own timer that, when it reaches 0, a random number between 1 and 20 is generated. If the number is less than or equal to the enemy's level, then that enemy takes their action. In the case of Bonnie and Chica, that means they simply move from their current spot to another possible spot on their journey. The possible moves they can make are shown here in this diagram. I'll explain the other animatronics as they become relevant, because on day 1 and 2, the only really likely threat is our Bonnie stand-in Dongus, and our Chica stand-in Dungus. That's because on day 1, every enemy starts at level 0 and can't even move. Then at certain times each day, they level up by 1, as indicated by this table with data provided from the wonderful Tech Rules video. I still miss you. The final piece of the equation is knowing exactly how Dingus interacts with this world and what he gets rewarded and punished for. It's actually really complicated this time around, so I put this big old chart here to explain it all. Please feel free to pause and take a look. So with all that put together then, almost certainly our biggest threat in Night 1 is actually just Dingus running out of power. So without any further wait, let's get started. So yeah, as you can see, on Night 1, Dingus is just too keen to use up power. This is with virtually no threats approaching either. So right after my spiel about power management being the biggest problem, I'm immediately proven wrong by the world's most eager level 1 and 2 Dongus. He absolutely speeds over and kills Dingus before he's even understood basic door mechanics. So, yeah, okay, technically there are actually, 2 risks on day 1. Also, seeing as he's already died to it, it's important to explain how Bonnie and Chica, or Dongus and Dungus's, jump scares work in Freddy's, as well as in Freddingus's. Basically, if the door they're waiting against is open, and they succeed their movement check, they're coming in. But you're not actually dead at this stage. Instead, they will just jam your door, and just chill and wait until you close your camera. If the camera is open, then after waiting for 30 seconds, they'll pull it down and kill you. The next try, we do actually encounter the first big problem. It's not even 5 AM, and Dingus is nearly out of power. Now to explain, when power runs out, Dingus doesn't immediately die. Instead, after 5 to 20 seconds, it's random. Friendly music plays to set your fears to rest. Then, 5 to 20 seconds afterwards, again, it's random in intervals of 5 seconds. Everything then goes silent. And then every 2 seconds, there's a 20% chance you get jumped. The next few tries end exactly the same way. Bad energy management gets greeted with death. Until finally, we have this really promising run. There's better energy management here. Dingus is in with a chance, though Dongus has crept up on his left. And yeah, I'm just gonna let this one play out, because it's one of the most impressive games of chicken I've seen. No, Dingus, just keep the... Shut the door, Dingus! Dingus, you don't have to die, you can see him right there. Just go back left. Yeah, yeah, put the door down. Put the door... No, Dingus, put the door down. Dingus, no. Yeah, 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 shut the door. Yes, yes, you're gonna live. No, you fool. Yes, okay. Okay, no! Dingus, go back. You don't have to die. Dingus, please. Dingus, Dingus, go left. Dingus, Dingus, no. Please, Dingus, go back. You still have a chance. Yeah? Close the... No. No. Dingus. Oh. Right, well, you deserved that. Next night, we see the slightly improved power management from Dingus again, and Dongus isn't exactly making great pace. It's 5 AM, and Dongus slowly makes his way towards the west door. Dingus, what is your fascination with the east door? Anyways, Dongus finally makes it to the doorway. Fortunately, Dingus shuts the door quickly, then opens it, then shuts it again. Dingus then uses the light to identify that Dongus is indeed outside of his door, and then, never mind, Dingus wants to die. Fortunately, he's saved by the sudden power out. Did he buy enough time to actually survive the night? Well, there you go. Yep, he did. Good job, Dingus. I'm not exactly proud, but you did indeed survive. So as I mentioned, night 1 is pretty much only good for teaching some basic power management. So let's move straight on to night 2. So night 2 is basically still just night 1 in terms of mechanics that Dingus needs to learn. And so Dongus himself is really the only risk here. Well, Dongus and power management, which Dingus still hasn't exactly gotten a good handle on. And every single night, power drains a little bit faster, up until night 5. So just because he managed to do power management for one night doesn't mean he's necessarily figured it out for all nights. And on his very first run on night 2, at 2 AM, Dingus finds his first challenge. Dongus arrives outside the west door, and yeah, he does nothing. Yep, you just let him wander right on in. I think we have a ways to go, Dingus. I'm going to take the time to point out that I'm actually running 2 environments, each with 82 separate Dingus agents running at the same time. So that's 164 Dinguses training and learning in parallel. This means that for each run you see, there are 163 other runs that Dingus is also acting and experimenting in, and presumably learning from those experiences. In the next run, again at 2 PM, Dongus shows up, and this time Dingus is on the ball. He almost immediately shines the light, determines that Dongus is there, and then shuts the door on him. And then opens the door. And then turns around and looks to his... Dingus, please. Dingus, please go back to the west door. Dingus, please. Dingus. He eventually does return to the door and shines his light there again. And still doesn't close the door. Dingus, please. Dingus, please close the door. I'm begging you, just close the... Right. Well, you deserved that. Moving on to the next night. And Dingus has now found himself in a very, very sticky situation. Dongus is on the left. Dingus has realized he should damn well be keeping that door closed, with a little bit of added taunting on the left. Okay, Dingus, cut that out, you twitchy cube. Dongus, however, will just not leave him alone. And now Dongus has crept up on the right. At this point, it's Panic City, as a twitchy Dingus swings side to side, opening and closing doors in a mad stupor. The pressure has caught up to him, and eventually Dongus creeps in, and he gets his jump scare. And here's another interesting run. At the 2 AM mark, we see Dongus has made it outside the room. He finally turns around, closes the door, and at that exact moment, Dongus succeeds his movement check, being blocked and moving back to the dining area. The next danger moment comes at 4 AM, when Dongus makes his way back again. However, this time, Dingus, in his fear, has maxed out his energy usage by keeping both doors closed. The only thing that could get Dingus killed now would be by opening that door, which he does not do this time, and so once again Dongus is thwarted. At 5 AM, Dongus starts schmoozing his way back. However, the doors are still closed, so the only thing Dingus needs to do is keep them closed. Oh, you idiot. But he also used the light switch and found him, so now Dingus knows for sure there's someone just outside his door. And not a moment too soon, because Dongus very quickly succeeds after his movement action. Dingus then quickly opens the door after the attack too. The power is looking a bit low, but with his current power usage, Dingus will likely make it. In the final seconds of the night, Dongus has shown up on the west door again. Dingus quickly identifies him, puts down the door, then opens it up again, and then it powers out, and then the night completes. Now we're into night 3, and night 3 is one of the interesting ones, because on this night, Dongus's AI is set to 0 at the start. Meanwhile, Dungus, our Chica stand-in, is at level 5. This makes it a much more significant threat this night. Additionally, finally, Freddingus is at level 1, which means he can move. The odds that he gets to get to the office aren't huge, but we'll actually see movement from him now, so it's worth explaining how he works. Essentially, Freddy, played by Freddingus, behaves a lot like Bonnie and Chica, played by Dongus and Dungus, with a few additional mechanics. The first is, if your camera is open when he makes a movement check, even if he scored high enough to move, he will fail that check. When he succeeds, he also doesn't immediately move. Instead, he has a short delay based on his level. He then does a jolly laugh that gets louder the closer he gets to you, and moves. Once he arrives at camera 4B, the boy is camping there. At this point, his rules change. If you are in cams and not looking at camera 4B, and the east door is open, once he's passed that movement check, he lets himself in. Then, for every second out of cams, he has a 25% chance to jump scare you. So with that explained, let's keep going into night 3. This first attempt is incredibly boring. Because of the chance-based movements on animatronics, it's possible to get crazy instances like this. 3 AM is nearly over before Dungus finally reaches the east door, the first threat of the night. Dingus takes advantage of this incredible luck by not bothering to check the east door hallway at all, in spite of the fact that he previously could not leave that freaking thing alone. And then he dies. Honestly, it's not too surprising. Dungus is much less likely to reach the door than Dongus in early nights. This means that Dingus has had very few opportunities to actually learn how to deal with Dungus. Unfortunately, the next attempt ends exactly the same way. Though Dingus does spot Dungus at the doorway this time, he chooses to ignore it and instead just play with the camera. He eventually dies again, and he definitely deserved it. Fortunately, in the next run, we seem to see a bit of learning. It goes smoothly until 1 AM where Dungus shows up pretty quickly. Dingus hears footsteps, notices Dungus with the lights, and then decides to actually block it with the door. Success! Anyways, at 3 AM, Dungus shows back up and Dingus could not care less about that. He fumbles with the camera and once again dies for his trouble. Next try was completely ridiculous. It took until freaking 4 AM before Dungus finally actually got to the doorway. Anyway, long story short, he actually blocks Dungus this time. Next, shortly after, Dongus shows up on the left, but Dingus is more of a Dongus expert. My god, what is this writing? What are these names? Why do they do this? So he quickly moves over to the doorway and closes it. After narrowly avoiding death there, Dungus once again comes from the right and... Okay, I do feel a little bad here. Dingus doesn't respond to the arrival, instead opting to go into cams, and Dungus then makes his way into the office, at which point the power runs out. Now in base Freddy's, I believe Dingus wouldn't actually die here. However, in my implementation, the camera being pulled down during a power out does actually kill you if somebody's already gotten into the room. Sorry Dingus, you probably deserved to win this one. Actually, no you didn't, you should have just closed the stinking door, try again. Alrighty, next try, and it only took until 1 AM for Dungus to get into attack position this time. Dingus acted correctly, closing the door and flashing him. It takes until 2 AM before Dungus shows up there again. Dingus quickly shuts the door once again and uses his flashy to confirm he isn't just overly paranoid. He then toggles the door off and on again quickly, maybe in an attempt to give me a heart attack, and then keeps the door closed, preventing the attack. Retreating back to the hallways, Dungus quickly makes another attempt at 3 AM. Dingus quickly shines the light on him to confirm his arrival, and then closes the other door instead for some reason. Apparently, actually tired of dying now, Dingus closes the door a fraction of a second before Dungus attacks in yet another incredible fluke. At 4 AM, Dungus finally arrives outside the west door, which is already closed. After seemingly panicking and slamming the door open and shut a few times, Dingus successfully blocks the attack. Interestingly, despite only being level 1, Freddingus has actually made it to camera 4B by the end of the night. I'm curious to see if Dingus would have survived this, but I also realize that the power has run out. All that's left now is to wait and see if Dingus lasted long enough to survive the blackout. Well done, Dingus. Not a bad attempt. Okay, night 4. This is the night that Foxy, played by Kev, is at his most active outside of night 6. Kev starts at level 6 this time around, which means there is actually a chance of an attack. So Kev has movement opportunities just like every other enemy in the game. But when he succeeds, he doesn't actually move. Instead, he goes up one phase. On phase 4, Kev finally prepares to attack. After 25 seconds, he will go to your office and kill you if your door is open. And otherwise, if the door is closed, he'll bang on it, take a bunch of your power, then leave. The amount of power he takes every time he hits your door at night increases exponentially, so you don't want him hitting your door. The most important mechanic about Foxy Kev is that every time you enter cams, Kev is frozen, not allowing for any successful movement checks. Additionally, once you leave cams, Kev is once again frozen for a set period of time. This freeze period lasts between 0.83 seconds and 15 point something seconds, I've forgotten. So frequently turning on the cams is how you control Foxy. Dingus actually has really good camera management to begin with, so maybe Kev won't be a problem. And so we get started with night 4. It takes a while for anyone to get aggro, although Kev is at phase 3, so it's unlikely Dingus will avoid an attack this night. Next up, Dungus shows up, and he blocks Dungus easily enough, but then at 4, something interesting happens. Freddingus has arrived at 4B. Dingus starts with good camera management here, keeping it focused on Freddingus. But in the small amount of time when he swapped out to a different cam, Freddingus made it into the office, and Dingus's fate was sealed. The next one feels like deja vu. A simple Dungus block, and then Freddingus was in position. Followed up with a mismanaged camera, and so Dingus dies again. In case it isn't obvious yet, the main thing that seems to prompt Dingus to check the lights are if he hears footsteps at this point. This is a very energy efficient way to keep enemytronics under control, but there's a risk that he will get confused regarding which side and direction the footsteps are coming from. This also isn't really the strategy a fallible human would use. Instead, they'd just be checking the lights more often. Perhaps a future modification I could do is just sometimes not play the footsteps. But on the topic of sounds, it turns out the original Five Nights at Freddy's has a ton of sound cues. A few I wasn't even aware of. Which brings us to the next run. It's another slow start, with the first attack coming at 3 AM from Dungus. Dingus blocks it easily, and now Freddingus is at the door. Now, camera usage is very dangerous, and it doesn't seem like Dingus cares. Now, the FNAF experts amongst you might have realized that something is off about Freddingus's behavior. Now, don't you worry, I'll get to that very soon. It takes until 5 AM before another animatronic tries to attack. Dungus appears at the west and Dingus blocks him easily. And Dungus just farted around all night, never even bothering to show up. And with that, night 4 was survived. But there was a problem. Something felt wrong with Freddingus. After finishing training, watching all the footage, editing through it, and finishing up a script, I realized that Freddingus was not behaving the way he was supposed to. Freddingus is not meant to move back to 4A under any conditions unless you are in a camera that is not 4B, have your door closed, and he has succeeded in a movement check. However, he has been moving back to 4A whenever he succeeded on a movement check when you weren't in cameras. This makes him significantly easier to deal with. I quickly fixed up the code to behave correctly, and because I only realized this mistake during editing, the model had a few more hours to train than what I'd shown here. So I took that model, started on day 5, and full of dread, I initialized my new model using the old one. So this is the ultimate test for Dingus. Now Freddingus is operating at its true power, and it's day 5. Will Dingus be able to survive? Let's find out. Looking at the numbers, Night 5 is significantly more dangerous. Dongus more than doubles his level, Freddingus is more aggressive, and Dungus is nearly double the previous day's level. Now, Kev is actually a lower level than last night, but honestly I suspect he won't really be much of an issue. Dingus's camera management strategy is just good at countering him. The first attempt ends rather predictably, with Freddingus showing up and Dingus letting him right on in. I leave Dingus to train for a while. He needs an opportunity to learn how to handle this new and powered up Freddingus. After a few iterations, we get this run. Dingus closes the door here, and then immediately enters into a camera other than 4B. This means Freddingus makes a kill attempt and is blocked, sending him back to the other hallway and setting some pressure off of Dingus. He seems to have figured out the strategy for handling Freddingus. Dingus has survived 5 nights at Freddingus's. Oh, and he quits. Oi, thanks so much for watching.